Have you ever stopped to think that, with all the technology of the 21st century, with cranes capable of lifting hundreds of tons, with computers that calculate space trajectories, with artificial intelligence solving complex problems in seconds, we, modern humanity, would be incapable of replicating the Great Pyramids of Egypt exactly as they were built more than 4,500 years ago? The answer is not only surprising, it is disturbing. And what you are about to discover will completely change the way you see human progress, ancient technology, and the real limits of our knowledge. Stay with me until the end, because this goes far beyond any conspiracy theory. We are talking about concrete facts, engineering analyses, and a forced humility in the face of the impossible. But before we dive into the devastating technical details, you need to understand the scale of the challenge. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, also known as the Pyramid of Giza, originally stood 146 meters tall and contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Yet some blocks in the internal chambers weigh up to 80 tons. Its base covers 13 acres, and the precision of its alignment with the cardinal points is within 0.05 degrees. We are talking about an angular margin of error smaller than the thickness of a human hair. According to traditional Egyptology, the pyramid was built in approximately 20 years during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2560 BC. That means that, working 10 hours a day, 365 days a year, the builders would have had to position one 2.5-ton block every 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Let that sink in. And this is only the beginning of our analysis. Now let's go straight to the point that has troubled modern architects and engineers for decades. There are construction companies around the world that are perfectly capable of building tall structures, massive bridges, and complex underwater tunnels. But none of them would accept a contract to replicate the Great Pyramid using the same materials, the same dimensions, and the same level of precision, not because it is absolutely impossible, but because it would be absurdly expensive, dangerously complex, and still would not reach the perfection of the original. In 1978, Japanese engineers from Waseda University attempted to build a reduced-scale pyramid only 18 meters tall using ancient techniques. They failed. They had to resort to cranes and helicopters. In 2002, another attempt was made in a BBC documentary where a team tried to move a single 2.5-ton block using ancient methods. It took days and nearly caused fatal accidents. The reality is this: we know how to build skyscrapers, but we do not know how to build perfect pyramids. And here is the point no one wants to admit openly. The question is not whether we can lift heavy blocks. Obviously we can. We have mobile cranes that can lift 200 tons. The real question is this: can we do it with millimeter precision at the required production volume, with structural durability, with perfect astronomical alignment, with strategically positioned hidden chambers, with ventilation shafts at exact angles pointing to specific constellations, and do all of this within 20 years, without computers, without steel, without combustion engines? The honest answer from any serious engineer is no, not in the way it was done. We can build something similar, but not identical. And that difference is where all the fascination and all the mystery reside. Let's start with the most basic problem. Where would the stones come from? The pyramids of Giza were built primarily from limestone quarried locally, about 400 meters from the construction site. But the original outer casing, which was stolen over the centuries, was made of white Tura limestone, located 15 kilometers away on the other side of the Nile River. The internal chambers use red granite from Aswan, an astonishing 800 kilometers to the south. Today, to replicate this, we would need environmental permits to operate quarries, environmental impact studies, negotiations with governments, and road or river transport logistics. Each block would have to be cut, numbered, transported, and positioned. Bureaucracy alone would take years before construction even began, and we have not yet touched the technical issue of cutting the stones. Stone cutting is where things become truly mysterious. The ancient Egyptians had no steel tools. They used copper, bronze, and stone tools. Yet Aswan granite has a hardness of 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale, while copper has a hardness of only 3. In theory, you cannot cut something harder with something softer. Conventional Egyptology suggests the use of copper drills with abrasive sand, and modern experiments have shown this to be technically possible, but extremely slow. Engineers estimate that cutting a single granite block would take weeks. Now multiply that by thousands of blocks. The math simply does not work for a 20-year construction timeline. Today, we would use diamond saws, high-pressure water jets, and even laser cutters if necessary. But even with modern technology, cutting, transporting, and positioning 2.3 million blocks within 20 years would require an industrial operation of unprecedented scale. Speaking of industrial scale, how many workers would be required today? Estimates vary, but let's work with conservative numbers based on modern engineering analysis. For an operation running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that intensity would be required to meet the 20-year deadline, you would need at least 10,000 workers in rotating shifts. This includes specialized crane operators, masons, surveyors, field engineers, transport workers, logistics teams, safety supervisors, equipment maintenance technicians, and emergency medical teams. And all of these workers would need infrastructure: housing, cafeterias, water supply, sanitation, and electrical power for a base camp. We are talking about creating a temporary city in the desert. Labor costs alone, following modern labor standards, would easily exceed $5 billion, without even counting materials and equipment. And speaking of equipment, let's get to the heart of the issue. How many cranes would be required? To lift 2.5-ton blocks to increasing heights of up to 146 meters, you would need large tower cranes. A typical construction crane can lift up to 20 tons, but the height and reach required to work on a pyramid would demand specialized models. Considering the base area, approximately 230 meters on each side, you would need at least 20 to 30 tower cranes working simultaneously, strategically positioned around and within the construction perimeter. Each of these cranes costs between $500,000 and $2 million to lease over several years. And here is the problem no engineer can solve. How do you position these cranes without interfering with one another, without creating blind spots, and still maintain the millimeter precision required for each block to fit perfectly without mortar? The Egyptians did not use cement between the blocks. They fit so perfectly that you cannot slide a knife blade between them. Which brings us to the issue of cement. Would we use modern cement in a replica? Technically, we could attempt to replicate it without cement, as in the original, but that would require cutting and positioning precision that today is only achieved in high-value industrial components, such as aircraft turbines. Each block would need faces so perfectly flat and smooth that gravity and weight alone would keep everything in place. Manufacturing, too. 3 million blocks with this level of precision using modern technology would be possible, but the cost would be astronomical, and the time required for quality inspection would make it impossible to meet the deadline. The alternative would be to use modern mortar to compensate for imperfections, But then it would not be a faithful replica. It would be a crude imitation. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Even with our computers and precision technology, it would be harder and more expensive for us today than it apparently was for them 4,500 years ago. Now let's talk about something that truly sets the ancient pyramids apart from anything we build today: their energetic and acoustic properties. Independent researchers have discovered that the Great Pyramid has unusual electromagnetic resonance properties. In 2018, a study published in the Journal of Applied Physics demonstrated that the pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers and beneath its base. Was this intentional? A coincidence? No one knows for sure. But if we wanted to replicate these properties, we would need physicists, electrical engineers, and acoustic specialists involved from the very beginning of the project. Exact orientation, material composition, even internal humidity, all of this affects those properties. Replicating it would require constant measurement and adjustment, making the project infinitely more complex. And we would have to be honest enough to admit we do not fully understand how they achieved this, so we do not know if we could intentionally reproduce it. And then there are the secret chambers and mysterious shafts. The Great Pyramid contains 3 known main chambers: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and the unfinished subterranean chamber. But it also contains narrow shafts rising at precise angles from these chambers. For decades, they were thought to be ventilation shafts, but recent analyses show that they point towards specific constellations, Orion and Sirius, which held deep spiritual significance for the Egyptians. Constructing these shafts would require extremely complex three-dimensional architectural planning, because they must pass through the massive structure without compromising its structural integrity, maintaining exact angles over dozens of meters. Today, we would use BIM, Building Information Modeling software, to plan this digitally before placing a single stone. Even so, physical execution, with blocks already positioned, creating a three-dimensional labyrinth, would be a logistical nightmare. And recent discoveries using cosmic muon technology have revealed that there may be still unknown chambers inside the pyramid. Did the builders know this? If so, how did they plan with such precision? How long would it really take to build a perfect replica today? Being brutally honest, even with unlimited resources, an open budget, the best teams in the world, and cutting-edge technology, we are talking about at least 30 to 40 years. And that assumes no unexpected technical obstacles, no political or financial interruptions, and the ability to keep teams working at the same intensity for decades. In practice, it would probably never be completed. Modern construction projects of this magnitude always exceed timelines and budgets. The new Berlin airport was supposed to take 6 years and took 14. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona has been under construction for more than 140 years and is still unfinished. And the Great Pyramid, according to official history, was completed in 20 years with Bronze Age technology. Shouldn't that discrepancy make us stop and think? But let's assume we actually build the replica. Would it have the same durability? The pyramids of Giza have survived 4,500 years of earthquakes, sandstorms, looting, demolition attempts, and extreme climate changes. Modern concrete has an estimated lifespan of 50 to 100 years before significant deterioration begins. Steel corrodes. Modern materials are designed for functionality and cost, not eternity. If we used limestone and granite like the original and somehow achieved the same precision of fit, theoretically our replica could last just as long. But there is a factor no one considers. The Egyptians may have used stone treatment techniques that we have lost. Some researchers suggest they knew how to temporarily soften stone using natural chemical compounds, explaining the impossible precision of the joints. If this is true, and we do not know how to do it, our replica will always be inferior. And here is the reflection that truly matters. We live in an era where we believe progress is linear, that we are automatically more capable, more intelligent, more advanced than any previous civilization. But the pyramids force us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps certain forms of knowledge were lost. Perhaps technological progress does not mean superiority in every area. Perhaps there were methods, techniques, and understandings of materials and physics that the ancients mastered and that we, with all our modern arrogance, simply did not recover. I'm not suggesting aliens or mystical technology. I'm suggesting something far more humbling, that we profoundly underestimate the capacity, intelligence, and dedication of our ancestors, and that our dependence on machines and computers, while powerful, has also created blind spots in our knowledge. How many men would we need? We already talked about the 10,000 direct workers, but consider the entire support chain. To feed, transport, house, and equip these people, you would need another 5,000 to 10,000 workers in support roles. Farmers, drivers, cooks, medical personnel, administrators, accountants, security staff. You are creating the equivalent of a city of 20,000 people operating with a single purpose for 30 years. The economic impact would be comparable to a space program. And that raises another question. How did the ancient Egyptians manage to feed and organize a workforce of this magnitude 4,500 years ago? Traditional theories speak of farmers working during the Nile floods when fields were inaccessible, but even so, the logistics are staggering, and recent archaeological discoveries show that workers were well fed, received medical care, and were organized into teams with their own names, indicating a sophisticated administrative system. Do we have something comparable today? Yes, but with computers, databases, and resource management systems. They did it with papyrus and ink. Do we really know the secrets? There are dozens of theories about how the pyramids were built. Straight external ramps, spiral ramps around the structure, internal ramps, counterweight systems, levers and rollers, even theories involving internal water channels. No single theory fully explains all the evidence. And here is the problem. Without knowing exactly how it was done, how would we replicate it? We would do it our way, with our techniques, and we might achieve a visually similar result. But it would not be the same. It would be like trying to replicate a Stradivarius. You can create a violin that looks identical, but something in the sound will be different. The pyramids hold secrets in their proportions, orientations, and construction that are still being discovered. In 2017, scientists discovered a large, empty chamber above the Grand Gallery using muon detectors. No one knew it was there. How many other secrets remain hidden? And if we do not know all the secrets, how can we fully replicate them? Exact measurements. Let's talk about that specifically, because this is where ancient precision becomes truly unsettling. The base of the Great Pyramid is an almost perfect square, with sides of approximately 230 meters. The difference between the longest and shortest side is only 4.4 centimeters, over 230 meters. That is a precision of 0.02%. The foundations were leveled to within 2.1 centimeters across the entire base, something we achieve today only with lasers and digital surveying equipment. The face angles are precise to a tenth of a degree. The alignment with true north has an error of only 0.05 degrees, more precise than the Royal Observatory of Greenwich when it was built in 1675. How did they achieve this without modern instruments? Sundials, stellar observations, methods we do not fully understand? And if we tried to replicate this precision today, every measurement would have to be checked and rechecked constantly, adding time and cost exponentially. Another rarely discussed aspect, the original finish. When the pyramids were completed, they were covered in polished white Tura limestone, so smooth and bright that they reflected sunlight like a mirror. This casing was almost entirely removed over the centuries to build structures in Cairo. But imagine the labor required to polish millions of square meters of stone to a perfect reflective shine, without modern polishing machines. Only hand tools, sand, and unimaginable patience. If we wanted to replicate this today, we would use industrial polishers, but even then, the human labor involved would be immense. And we would have to ask, why do this? What was the purpose of such a perfect finish? Aesthetics, religious symbolism, or something functional related to the energetic properties mentioned earlier? If we do not know the purpose, how do we know if our replica fulfills the original function? There's also the issue of context. The pyramids were not built in isolation. They are part of a complex that includes temples, causeways, smaller pyramids, mastabas, and the Sphinx. To truly replicate the entire Giza complex, you would be talking about a construction and archaeological project of absolutely monumental scale. The total cost would easily exceed 50 billion. And that is a conservative estimate. For perspective, the Apollo program that put humans on the moon cost about 150 billion in today's dollars. We are talking about a similar scale of investment. And for what? The ancient Egyptians' answer was clear. Eternity, religion, glorification of the pharaoh as a living god, preparation for the afterlife. What would be our motivation today? Tourism, national ego, proof of concept? Without the driving force of absolute religious belief, it would be impossible to sustain the project to completion. And let's be honest about something documentaries rarely mention. Many engineers and archaeologists in private conversations admit that there are aspects of pyramid construction that simply do not make sense with our current understanding. I am not talking about wild theories, but legitimate questions. How were 80-ton blocks moved into the king's chamber at the heart of the structure through narrow passages? How were the granite blocks above the king's chamber cut and positioned with millimeter precision, creating an ingenious stress relief system? How were structural forces calculated without advanced engineering mathematics? The honest answer is often, we do not know for sure. We have theories, partial replication attempts, but we do not have the complete method. And this gap in knowledge means that any modern replica would, at best, be an educated interpretation, not a faithful copy. What does all of this reveal about us today? It reveals that we live in a bubble of technological confidence. We believe that because we have smartphones and artificial intelligence, because we can edit genes and launch cars into space, we are superior in every way to those who came before us. But here stands a physical, real, tangible structure that challenges that narrative. It is not mythical, not legendary. It is there, measurable, studied for decades, and yet we still cannot fully replicate it. That should teach us humility. It should make us question what else we lost along the way. What other techniques, what other knowledge did ancient civilizations possess that we, in our relentless rush forward, left behind? And most importantly, what does this mean for the future? If such fundamental knowledge can be lost, What of our current civilization will survive? In 4,500 years, what will remain of our buildings, our digital technologies, our records stored on servers that require constant electricity? So if you have made it this far, you have absorbed something most people prefer to ignore. That progress is not guaranteed, that knowledge can be lost, that we are simultaneously more and less capable than we think. The Great Pyramids are an uncomfortable mirror, showing both our power and our limitations. We can go to the moon, but we cannot stack stones with the same mastery as our ancestors, and perhaps that is the most important lesson. Respect. Respect for what came before. Humility in the face of mysteries we have not yet solved, and recognition that each generation has its own gifts and its own losses. If this analysis changed your perspective on the ancient and the modern, on human capability and the limits of technology, share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you want more content that challenges what you think you know, that confronts uncomfortable truths, and that looks to the past to understand the present, subscribe now to the channel. Because stories like this are not just about ancient stones. They are about who we are, where we came from, and where we are truly going. And that is a journey you cannot take alone.